Henny Moet Roth. My maiden name is Henriette Moet. But from the time I was a child, an infant, I've been called Henny. Even at school, elementary school, I was registered as Henny. So if somebody says to me, Henriette, I know they don't know me. I was born in Antwerp, Belgium, on November 30, 1923.
And can you tell me a little bit about your family?
My parents, Enoch and Ida Moet, were living in Belgium. They had lived there before the First World War. My father was a quiet person, and he did have a quiet sense of humor also, but he quiet. And my mother was more talkative. And but anyway, but he was a man of action. He knew what to do, when to do, or whatever. After all, he was born in Russia as a child, young child, was taken by his parents to Palestine, lived in Jerusalem, was bar mitzvah in Jerusalem, then was sent to his big brothers in Antwerp, Belgium, to learn the diamond trade. So he had traveled quite a lot in his lifetime. And he was, as the French say, débrouillard. He knew his way around. You know, I didn't used to think that he was that intelligent or whatever. He was. He really was very. He could seize the moment and make a decision and carry through. You know, he was really. He was modest. He was very quiet and modest, and so on. Loved, adored his wife, my mother. You know, but left all the household decisions to her, and so on. My big brother, Eli, was born in Antwerp in 1912. Then, when the 1914 war broke out, my mother, who was born in Holland, in Amsterdam, and my father and Eli went back to Germany invaded Belgium, but Holland was neutral in the First World War. So they went to live in Holland during the period, length of the war. And my sister Ruth was born there on January 1st, 1918. Then my parents and the two children came back to live in Antwerp, and I was born there in 1923. As a child in school, my teacher told my mother that I once said, in our house, in our home, there's a child born every 6 years, because that was the spacing between my brother, my sister, and I. And of course, my parents got a big kick out of that. So Belgium is a bilingual country. At home, we spoke French as our first language. And of course, my mother being born in Holland, we spoke Dutch also. And my father, when he didn't want his children to understand what he was saying, would talk to my mother in Yiddish. And that's how I learned to understand Yiddish quite well. And eventually, in high school, I took English and German courses, as well as Latin and Greek. Oh, and throughout my childhood and my teen years, my sister and I had private lessons, Hebrew lessons at home. So I have a slew of languages under my belt. Actually, my father, who was a diamond dealer, had, there were 6 brothers, and all the brothers were in the diamond business. And some lived in Antwerp, and some lived in Antwerp, in Palestine, in South Africa, and in New York. But they always came back to Antwerp and they were all diamond dealers. So we had such a large family that between the in-laws and the Moet family, that my mother really had no other friends. I mean, she made particular friends with some family members who were closer to us than others, but it was such a large family that we really didn't have friends outside the family.
What was your childhood like in Belgium?
I wrote the story of my youth and our flight to the United States in 1940 in this little book, Just a Jewish Girl. It has my whole story in it. And I have extra copies of the book, so anybody who sees this film is welcome to ask me for a copy. I'm here, second from bottom row, with my best girlfriend, Yvonne de Laat, who was not Jewish and lived in Antwerp throughout the war, and we got back together after the war. And we remained very close friends, very good friends. But it's interesting, in the school system in Antwerp, we were in a class and we went up grade by grade by grade, that same class. Sometimes somebody might drop out, or somebody might come in. But on the whole, we knew each other for a good 8-10 years. Yes, I mean, many years. And only one perished in the show, my friend Caroline Markovits, right, the one top row here. Everybody else survived. Some came also to the United States. I mean, and we met in the United States. But some I met after the war. I visited Belgium a few times, and we got back in touch with each other. And one, the little one, the top row in the middle, Jacqueline Wall, still lives in New York City. She never married, and she was brilliant. She was #1 in the class. We used to get graded, you know, every year, and nobody could beat her, this little girl here. I was always in the top 5 of our class, but she was #1, and nobody could beat her.
I know you grew up during the war and the Holocaust. What was that like, and how did you escape?
On May 10, 1940, I was living in Antwerp. We had a 5th-floor condominium apartment in the center of town, not far from the Diamond District and the main central station. And I awoke to the sound of gunfire or explosions. And I rushed to the window. I had large windows. And I was in the front of the apartment facing on the street side. My parents had the apartment in the back, their rooms. I looked out the window and I could see fighter planes, small planes, you know, diving and flying and diving up and down. And I could even see some explosion shots, I mean, white clouds or white, you know, white shots. And this was near the cathedral, which was in the distance by the harbor, the main church of Antwerp, the cathedral. And of course, we put on the radio, and my parents woke up too, and we heard that Belgium was invaded by German Air Force. My parents sent me to school that morning. I had breakfast and went to school. Our class got together, and everybody looked very serious, and our teachers looked very serious. We were told by our head teacher that school would be closed temporarily, and we would be advised about what happened. You know, that Belgium had been invaded by Germany that morning, that day. And, well, in late morning, we left, and I walked part of the way home with my best friend, Yvonne, who's here, the two of us here. And she, well, we said goodbye to each other and wished each other good luck, because she knew I was Jewish, and we kissed each other on the cheek. And we went our ways home. And then when I got home, we fled Antwerp, because my brother, big brother, was a soldier in the Belgian army. You have compulsory military service in Belgium, and then when you're 18, for 2 years, and then you get called back. And he had been called back in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. Belgium went on a alert footing, and he said to my parents, if the Germans invade Belgium, get out immediately because our puny little army isn't going to be able to hold them back, which was true. And so that's why we left immediately. And he managed to survive the war. He married his best girlfriend, who was Jewish, and they went to live in outside Brussels, where nobody knew them, and they didn't look particularly, quote, Jewish, unquote. Spoke Flemish, they were blonde, you know, and they blonde hair, and they spoke Flemish. You know, like the natives that they were. We really want to go to London because my father's a diamond dealer. Used to travel from Belgium to London almost every month to buy more stock or whatever. And we each packed one suitcase per person. So we had 3 suitcases. I had my own, and with change of clothing and, you know, just the necessities. A niece of my father and her husband and 2 children were going to the seacoast, and they agreed to take us in their car. You know, the kids would sit on our laps. It wasn't that big a car. We wanted to go to England. We couldn't manage to go to England. We thought we'd like to go to Palestine or to South Africa. We had family in South Africa. We got in touch with them, and they said the South African government was pro-German in those days, and our cousins said they're not going to welcome you here. We want to go to the Belgian Congo because as Belgian citizens who were fully entitled to live there, but there was no transportation available. German submarines were really ruling the oceans, the Atlantic Ocean, and it was very hard to get there. So we just fled to France, to the south of France, and we got to the Spanish border, and it was very funny. We wanted to go to Portugal, but to get onto ships because Portugal was neutral, and so was Spain. But in order to get a Portuguese visa as Belgian citizens, we had to go through Spain. We had to get a Spanish visa, and the Spaniards said, we can't give you a visa if you don't have a Portuguese visa. It was a, you know, no-win situation. So my father was a great one for just pushing on and going on and not staying behind, or, you know. I mean, he had had experience with the First World War, fleeing Belgium to Holland and so on. So, you know, he was a man of action. When it came to getting us out, he did. He is the one who brought us to the United States, who found the ships, who found the boats to go. I mean, he was a man of action. I mean, in his quiet way, he knew exactly what to do, when to do. If he didn't know what to do, he would just carry on and, you know, work his way out of the problem. And anyway, I mean, the more I think about him, the more I respect him for that. He found that there was a ship, a boat, the passenger, a cargo boat, but the line of these boats, they were merchant ships taking wines from France to many countries. And the company didn't want the boats to fall in the hands of the Germans, so they were getting ready to ship the boats empty, you know. And they said, oh, we'll take people aboard, but bring your own food. We're not prepared to feed you, you know. So we went, my mother, my sister, and I went shopping for food and drinks and bottles and whatever. And that's how, and the captain said, we're going to Africa, but he wouldn't say where. We said it didn't matter. By then, you know, the Germans were advancing through France, and we want to get the heck out of it, out of there. So we got onto the boat with a number of other refugees, and at the last moment, as the boat was ready to leave dock, a number of, about half a dozen young men jumped from the dock onto the boat, and they were young men who had fought in the Spanish Civil War, and the Germans had helped the Spanish dictator who was then in power, and so they didn't want to be stuck in France under German occupation. So, it was fine. The captain, they just jumped on board the ship, and it was the captain. The ship docked eventually in Casablanca. We had an eventful trip, and when we were in Casablanca, my father by then needed some cash, but he had his diamonds with him, and they had been sewn in little pouches, sewn into my mother's girdle. And she never took off that girdle, except to wash it occasionally. But, there they were. And he found a diamond dealer in Casablanca who needed stock, and he couldn't get to London. He couldn't get to, because Germany, the war was raging in Europe. And so my father sold him some diamonds, and we got some cash. And then my father, again, very resourceful, went around the harbor, found that this little Greek cargo boat, 2,600 tons, I think, small cargo boat, not a ship, a boat, was going to go to New York, and the captain was perfectly willing to take passengers on, and charge us as much as the flight from Lisbon on Pan American, to the United States. And we met up with some family members in Casablanca also, so about 13 of us got onto the ship, and the men slept in the dining living room on the floor. My mother, my sister, and I were given one of the ship's officers, the cabin, and I slept on the floor and had to battle cockroaches every night. But, it was okay. We were safe, And Greece was still neutral in those days, and the Greek flag was painted on the two sides of the boat so that if there were German submarines around, they could see that we were neutral. And hopefully they wouldn't shoot us, and nobody shot at us. And we made it safe and well to New York City. And, and then I spent 3 months in Ellis Island, which is another story. But
you were only 16 during the war. Were you scared?
No. No. In our family, we have this inner strength that whatever happens, you face that and you get over it, or you tackle it, Fear is something that is, how shall I say, it's negative. And we always stress the positive in our families. We all stress the positive elements, and you go for the strengths, and you go for the positive things, and you go to what's necessary to be done, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, but if it's necessary, you do it. And I don't know, we have a very common sense, no-nonsense kind of attitude. Fear destroys you, or fear stops you from acting. And when you have to act and make decisions, you can't let fear... fear is behind and is what's goading you, perhaps, but you don't let it master you.
What was it like afterwards?
Well, I lost 120 family members in the Shoah. Well, actually 125, counting the people on my mother's side, the family too. Which is another reason why I wrote this book, because I had pictures of a number of them who perished in the Shoah, photos in the book, in my little book. Some were, my father and his brothers. My father had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. And one sister and her husband perished in the Shoah in France. But most of them lived in Palestine, which in those days, in early 1940s, it was Palestine. and South Africa and New York and New York. So we were safe, except for my Aunt Dina, who is pictures in this book. And she and her husband and children, except for one son whom they had sent to Israel, to Palestine, and lived in the kibbutz in the 1930s. And he's the only one of that family who escaped. Here's a picture of my aunt and her husband and two of their children. This was taken during World War I when they had fled to London, and they were living in London. But they perished, all of them, in the Shoah. All these people you see here, these 4 people. Which is another reason why I put their pictures in this book, you know, to commemorate them. And I'm in very, very close touch with their only son, who survived by virtue of the fact that he lived in Palestine, and with his family. So we email each other all the time.
So you finally get to Ellis Island. Now what?
My father could not get into the United States because he was born in Poland, even though he had been a Belgian citizen for 40 years or more. And the Polish quota was oversubscribed. However, the government couldn't send us back to Europe because the war was raging over there. My mother and I, she was born in Holland, I was in Belgium, and we could have gotten in, but we weren't about to leave my father alone at Ellis Island, so we stayed with him. And it took about 3 months. In the meantime, my father had a brother in New York City. My mother had a brother in New York City. And through B'nai B'rith, they latched onto a nice young Jewish lawyer who went to work with about our case with the U.S. government and with the Department of State particularly. And he managed to get my father a visa for my father's stay in the United States for the duration of the war. And who knows how long that would be, but anyway. And so my father was released from Ellis Island with my mother and me. And we went to live in New York City, and there he became a diamond dealer, like his brother, Theodore. And then, of course, we applied for permanent immigration, and it took 4 or 5 years before, you know, with the State Department to get to be able to come. And we were living in New York. I had finished high school in New York, went to college, got jobs. My father was a diamond dealer, but we were safe, and so it didn't matter. And eventually, we did get our formal entry in the United States by going to the American consulate in Montreal, Canada, an overnight trip from New York City to Montreal about 5 years later. And we then, could apply eventually for citizenship, and I'm an American citizen now, of course. I was 16 years old when I came to the United States, so, I finished, I went from 1 year to high school and got my high school degree, New York City High School, Julia Richmond High School, and then I went to college at night, Hunter College, but I took night courses because my father wasn't really doing that well, and I felt I needed to support myself, and, I started working as a stenotypist, typist or whatever, and then secretary, and I worked many, many years. Actually, I worked, then I got married, and I had children, and I stopped working, but then I got divorced, and my ex-husband was very ill, and he didn't have, he had to pay child support, but he told me, I really don't have the money to give you, any kind of financial support. So I after my divorce, always and supported myself.
So you mentioned you got divorced, but how did you meet your husband?
In New York City, I belonged to a young people's group at the Park Avenue Synagogue off Park Avenue in Manhattan. And I went on a trip to Israel in 1950, 2 years after the birth of Israel. And Hadassah, I belong to Hadassah in New York, and they organized a college-age group of vacationers to take courses in the summer times during summer vacation in Israel. And it was a group of Americans and British, Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American group. And we met in Israel. I mean, we flew from New York to Israel in 1950. And that was my first trip. And I had lots of family in Israel, and I visited them, of course. And it was a wonderful trip, and I enjoyed it immensely, and I have a whole book of photos going back to that. I and another male member of the group, we would meet once a month at night and, have a lecture. And I invited some people I met on my trip to Israel to come and be our speakers. And so I chaired that evening's program. And my husband-to-be happened to be one of the guests in the audience. And he was struck by me, and he knew my best girlfriend who had been to Israel with me, and he asked her to introduce him to me. And that's how we met, and that eventually fell in love and got married.
And what attracted you to your husband?
He was a redhead. My mother was a redhead, and my sister was a redhead. So the redheads run a family, and I guess, had a predilection for redheads. And my children, my daughter, my late daughter, her picture is there up on the wall. She died in her 40s of stage 4 breast cancer. She didn't believe in doctors, and so when it was discovered it was stage 4, it was too late to help her. But anyway, also my husband-to-be was a redhead, and that's how we met, and we fell in love and got married.
I know you have 3 children. Can you tell me about them?
Our first children were our sons, who are identical twins, and they live here in Los Angeles. Well, Albert lives in Manhattan Beach, and Edward lives in Orange County in Laguna Hills. That's what brought me to California, because my ex-husband, eventually we got divorced in New York. It's not a long story, but we became very good friends, and we had a united front, he and I, in front of our children. We always agreed about the children. We didn't agree about money, but we agreed about children. And so we were actually always a very close-knit family. And to this day, my sons look after me and are very wonderful. My sons, who are twins, and are still best friends with each other. And on the phone, I can't really tell them apart, so they have to tell me who's calling me. And they check up on me every day. And Albert and Edward. Albert has been absolutely wonderful in that since the start of this coronavirus pandemic. He calls me every week to find out what I need in the way of food or other items, and then he shows up the next day, takes off his shoes at the front door, wears a mask, dashes off to the kitchen, puts everything away, and throws the bill on the table. I sit down at my dining room table and I write him a check.
Can you tell me a little bit about your daughter's death?
Gail died in 2006, and her father, my ex-husband, died 3 weeks later. They're buried next to each other Well, it was very, very painful, but I still talk to her picture, that's her high school senior picture up on the wall up there. And I talk to her every day. I was with her every single day. I drove her to her medical appointments, and people liked her. I mean, she was at the UCLA hospital in the south end of town, not in Westwood. Well, you know, my parents were very sensible. You just take life as it hits you, and you try to get through it as well and as possible. And, you know, you take your inner reserves and you do the best you can, and that's all. That's all you can do. You just face every situation for itself and cope with it and try to surmount it and face it as well as you can, and that's all that can be expected.
How do you feel the way you were raised influenced the way you raised your own children?
I would say family comes first. It was the basic rule. So we may disagree on various items or whatever, but we are there for each other always. I mean, that's our first rule, family rule. And that's how I was brought up, and that's how I brought up my children too. You know, family comes first. It extends to the outlying family members also. Yeah. To me, family is. I mean, I'm blessed that I have a wonderful family, and I mean, I like some people more than others. As my mother said, I mean, she had to contend with 5. Brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, you know, her husband's family, and she didn't necessarily like some of them more than others, you know, but she said, we can always be polite. And so we didn't have any family feuds. I mean, that didn't exist in my family, and it was a very large family on both sides, you know, but we did not have family feuds ever, no.
I know you currently live in Los Angeles. How did you get here?
We got divorced in Chicago. My husband had set up a business in Chicago, and we traveled quite a bit. And he traveled. He sold. He was a candy broker for candy manufacturers, selling to chain stores and stores. And he liked Chicago, but after he became very, very ill. We got divorced in Chicago, and he became very ill, so ill that he was on the point of dying, and a rare disease. And eventually, he went to live in South Africa, where they had British socialized medicine. He couldn't afford being ill in the United States, and because he couldn't work, and this country wasn't set up to help him, but so he went to live in South Africa, and he had to pay child support, which was a help to me with our 3 children, and I remained living in Chicago. Eventually, I had a very good job with Encyclopedia Britannica, but I was all alone with these twin sons and their young sister, and I really worried that if the proverbial bus would hit me, the children would be all alone. And my sister lived in Miami Beach, Florida, with her husband and children, and I had visited her there, and she urged me to come and move down there, you know, and I felt for the children's sake it would be better for me to live there. So I lived in Miami for about 32 years. They have extremely good medicine in South Africa, and they are on the British socialized medicine system. So he could afford to be sick in South Africa, where he couldn't afford to be sick in the United States. And he got better, and, you know, good doctors. And eventually, though, things, political situation in South Africa became sort of iffy. He didn't like it very much, and he was homesick for his children, you know, and life back. And he moved back when he was feeling, you know, all well again. He was still under good medical care, and there were doctors in Los Angeles who was more specialized in his type of illness, and so from which he had mostly recovered. And so he settled in Los Angeles, California. And little by little, I was living in Miami, and I owned a house, and my children grew up there. And when my sons, who are twins, were about 20 years old, they couldn't find anything they liked in the way of jobs in Los Angeles, in Miami, and so they moved to one by one to Los Angeles, and my daughter followed suit. And I had a very good job with Miami-Dade County, and so I stayed there until I could claim retirement, and because I was self-supporting, and that was important to me. So I stayed there, sold my house, lived in a nice condo, which I rented, sublet, and in Miami, and worked for the county, Miami-Dade County, till I was there about 11 years when I could claim a pension. And to this day, I still get my monthly pension check. And then eventually, you know, I moved here to be close to my family, my children.
Can you talk a bit about your Judaism?
Religion, of course, was important, but Israel, Palestine was the most important thing because my father lived there as a youngster, and I have this family picture. My grandparents lived, of course, in Jerusalem in 1910, and they came to visit in Antwerp, Belgium, and they had this picture taken of all their sons and all their daughters, and the wives and husbands of sons and daughters, and all the grandchildren. Now, this picture was taken in August 1910. So my father, these are his parents here, 3 sisters, all the brothers, the 5 other brothers. My grandfather was a world traveler. I'm told that he came to the United States, decided that Jews couldn't really live a proper Jewish life here, and didn't want to settle here, bring his family and settle here, and went back. I don't know, I haven't found a record of his actually coming to the United States, but that is a story I was told. He took his children to Palestine, his wife and children to Palestine in the early 1890s. And the daughters were married in Jerusalem. I mean, we had this long-standing relationship with Israel. And this picture is in the homes of countless members of my family. And the children and grandchildren, and we all have that picture, and we have it overblown, you know. And it can be found on 3 continents at least. So that's why I say we are, you know, we were such a united family, a large family and close-knit, that we didn't really need friends. I mean, we all had friends, of course, but family came first. Well, because we are descendant of the first Moed, the man who took the name Moed was my great-great-grandfather, Rabbi Shmuel Hakatan Moed. We are very proud Jews. We are also long-time supporters of Eretz Israel.
You're the genealogist of the family. How did you get into it, and what drew you to genealogy?
Well, actually, my cousin Jules Moed in London was the one who put together the family tree, the original family tree. By then, this was in the late 90s, like 1990. And he sent information about the family to about 130, 170 family members all over the world. And I, by then, was living alone and had all the time, you know, I was working, but had plenty of time and became very interested in that and helped him and started doing research. And he's passed on now, my cousin Jules from South Africa. But, and well, he died in London, and I met him in London. But I picked up on his work, and so I'm now the senior Moet family genealogist. Okay, I belong to the Jewish Genealogical Society of Los Angeles, and one of our speakers was this Belgian guy, Erwin Joos, of the Eugene van Meeghem Museum in Antwerp, Belgium, who was going to be our speaker. And because I was Belgian, you know, it was like we should meet. And when he came and stayed with one of our Jewish Genealogical Society members here, but they got him in touch with me, and we became fast friends. And he heard about my story and my life in Antwerp, and I mean, to this day we are very good friends. And he's back in Belgium, but he's a traveler and travels all over with his wife, travels all over. And anyway, he met me and Jane Burns, who is a member of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Los Angeles, and she is a editor, and she puts books together, and she's the one who put this book together for me. And because she found my trove of family photos and so on, you know, and my stories. And while we were putting the book together in 2010, Erwin stayed with her while he was visiting and going to give his lecture to our genealogical society here in Los Angeles. And he said to her, I'm going to pay you to write a story about Henny. And he's the one, and that's why I have his picture in my book, because he's the one who paid for the original work of Jan to put the book together. And then we had 1,000 copies made, no, 100 copies made, and they were distributed. And I'm now working, you see that big blue box there under the desk, that has the second batch of 100 copies that I ordered and paid for myself. And because so many people find it interesting. This is really about my youth, just a Jewish girl, so it will be about my life in Antwerp till World War II, 1940. And, but as I was putting it together, I said, this is my chance to memorialize all the people who perished in our family, who perished in the Shoah, in the Holocaust. And so I made a list of 120 Moet family members who perished in the Holocaust, and here in memoriam. And so there's 120 family members, including small children, and their names and dates of birth and dates of death, and who they are descended from, because there are some family members from my mother's side of the family also, and we are rabbinical families on both sides. And so I show here the names, the dates of birth, the dates of death, and how they are related. I mean, who they're descended from, either one rabbi or the other rabbi. And then there's 5 family members of my late husband, ex-husband, a good friend, Walter Roth, and they are also, I listed them there because I wanted my children to have that memoriam. In memoriam, yes, and there's page 1, page 2, and page 3. It's 125 names because there are some members of my late husband's family, about 5 members also, who perished in the Shoah.
If you could go back in time and talk to your childhood self, what would you say?
I was happy. I mean, I'm blessed. I feel blessed because I was brought up in a nice, decent family and protected, and we all protected each other. And, you know, I mean, I think family is the most important thing in one's life. And if one is blessed to have a loving, kind family, even though we have had divorces, we have had death, illness, whatever, you surmount it, but you help each other. And of course, that goes then on to the wider world also. You know, charity is a very important mitzvah, a very important part of our lives.
How do you want your loved ones to remember you?
Well, apart from family love and sharing love with family members, I think, well, I think that somehow the concept of God is there, you know, that this is what God wants us to be, good and kind and helpful. And it extends from the family, it then extends to your neighbors and to the wider population and to the world in itself. I think basically it's basic Judaism. It's my faith. My faith is everything to me in the sense that it's the strongest directive, and morality is what's most important, what I've inculcated in my children, and they are following through, all of them, you know, in a minor way, or if it's not necessary, you know, for them to give, they don't have to, but we share. I mean, that's what I've inculcated to my children and my grandchildren, and we share. We share each other's lives, we share each other's happiness, and we help each other if help is needed. That's the main thing. And of course, by then, after the family comes the rest of the world. Yes, it just carries right through. I'm very comfortable in my little home here. You know, I have all the family pictures right around me, and I never feel lonesome, and I never feel lost, and I never feel sad, you know, because I've got all this love.